realistically, how many of us have the time to figure out how to do generative design or something like that with a tool we've never used before? We're not programmers. So this idea kind of came up of what are some really simple things but powerful things you can do in Dynamo. I eventually did finally sit in on a class at AU, I believe, last year. It was called, I can't remember what the name of the class was called, but essentially the guy was like, here are like 4 or 5 scripts that all have less than 10 nodes that you can do some pretty cool stuff with in Dynamo. And that really kind of got my gears turning of what can we internally use Dynamo for that doesn't take, you know, some sort of computer science background or coding background or C# understanding to understand how to do. And that's kind of how this was born. So those of you who have not used Dynamo before, let me get out of this. Just a quick overview. I may not even speak intelligently about this because I am, like I mentioned, 100% self-taught in Dynamo, but basically Dynamo is a graphical programming for design and BIM. It basically allows us to create algorithms or a set of instructions telling Dynamo what we want it to do. What do we want it to go grab in Revit and figure out? And it allows us to use this, the tool itself is visual programming, which allows you to kind of program without having to know code. It's more of a graphic interface rather than typing lines of code. So it allows a lot of that code to be pre-written into these things called nodes. And then those nodes do different things. And then we can string them all together. Some people like to call it the spaghetti monster. You see all these strings going everywhere connecting to these nodes. So that in a nutshell is basically what it is. It's just a visual programming tool that allows you to kind of access more information into Revit. Okay, so with that being said, we're going to jump in. Any questions so far? You know, kind of jumping through and rambling a little bit. All right, so we're each going to show a couple. If we have more time, we'll show more. We're hoping that you'll ask some questions, see some benefit in this. And then if we have some more time, we'll show a couple more. We have a couple prepared. We are hoping to kind of make this somewhat regular. We can get some of you to share how you're using Dynamo. We want this to be pretty comfortable and laid back and just talk about how are we practically using Dynamo? What are some things that we can really do that help? So with that being said, here's my first one. This one we've used on the current project I'm on, saved us a ton of time. I'm gonna show you. All right, so on a Revit project, when people are placing rooms all throughout a floor plan, and no judging in my floor plan, this is a super simple example. That way you can kind of see what's going on. So oftentimes when you're on a project and someone's placing rooms in a model, they're just placing the rooms wherever they can click as fast as they can, and a room tag is typically assigned to that, so on and so forth. Very quickly, when you're starting to document a plan, that can become really frustrating, because if I were to come under architecture, tag room, tag all, not tag, and I just want to quickly tag my rooms, you can see that that tag goes right to that reference vertex or that intersection. And that looks really bad. That's not how we want our drawings to look. And so rather than coming in here and then grabbing the tag and moving it and trying to get these all lined up, I thought, okay, well, in Dynamo, is there any way that I can just tell the room to center and then apply the tags doing that? So that's what this first script is, super simple script. So I'm gonna open this here. So in all of my scripts, this is how I like to organize. So each grouping of nodes will have some sort of group, whether it's an input, an output, a data, or something like that. I like to keep it pretty simple. I also like to put that I created it, or I like to give credit where credit's due. So if I ever take a script and modify it, I'll put who created it, that I modified it, so on and so forth. And then I also like to talk about any packages I use, which I'll talk a little bit about what packages are in a second. So again, this is more for my brain to keep, you know, this example I showed here. It's just kind of all grouped together. No real structure, you don't know where to start. So all of my scripts you're going to see, I try to parse them out so that they're super easy to understand. All right, so this our first scripts. These are all of our nodes, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through logically what's happening here and kind of show you what Dynamo is grabbing in each of these things here. So I'm going to place a watch node, which just allows us to see what Dynamo is doing. All right, so the first step in centering the rooms in Revit, what I like to do, and a lot of the times you don't need to do this for every view because you may not want some of your room tags to be centered. You might not care about it in some of the stuff. So there's two ways I'm going to show you how to do this. One is going to be view specific. The next one's going to be for the entire project. So the first thing we need to do in Dynamo is I need to say, okay, well, grab the active view that I'm currently in. So there's a node here called document active view, which is what we want. And then we need to tell what current document. So all Dynamo is doing here is saying, grab the current document that I have open and grab the current view that I'm in. So I throw the output of this node into a watch node and run it. You're going to see here, I'm in my floor plan view. Here's the name of that floor plan. I'm in my first floor working plan. That's all that node is doing. It's saying, grab the view that I'm currently in. Then what I want to do is I'm telling it that I need to grab all of my rooms. So I'm going to drop a node here called categories, because I know in Revit, the easiest way to work is through Revit categories. So I just drop down a category node. You can see if I hit my drop down here, it's going to show me all of the different categories in Revit. And since I want to work with rooms, I'm going to grab my room category. Then I'm going to use a node here that's called select by category and view. So all it is doing is saying, give me the view that you want to work in, and then what category do you want to select? So what's happening here is, if I unfreeze this, oops. And I plug this in to see what Dynamo is doing here. You can see that it went into my document, went into the view I'm currently in, which is my first floor plan, grabbing all the rooms, and then it kicks me an output. So it's grabbed 9 rooms in that view, which is great. I can go back to Revit, count to make sure I have all of that. And then the awesome thing about Dynamo is there are so many scripts that have already been custom made that do all sorts of awesome things. So here you can see there's already a node that does exactly what I want to do. It's called room center room. So that's, you can see here it says rhythm next to that. So Dynamo being open source, there's a lot of people that go in there and they write their own nodes, their own codes, there's all that stuff, and they package them together into their own nodes. And they send those out as packages. So you can see here I have a bunch of different packages downloaded and installed. That's what I'm referring to up here as I'm telling you which packages I use, because if you just open Dynamo and start using it like I did, you're going to realize it is fairly limited. But there are so many people that have already developed a bunch of scripts, which is great. Also, yes, okay, I want to make sure I am reading the chat. Like Lisp routines, I have never done that, so I can't answer that. I don't know if anybody else can jump in and answer that question. Is that the old stuff through AutoCAD, how you could kind of create a series of commands through AutoCAD?
Yeah, it's definitely similar. Okay. You know, again, that's all basically through the, you know, command line scripts that you can load in and then run through the command line. So I think the end results wouldn't be too dissimilar to kind of the Dynamo being more of a graphic interface. Yeah,
and I think it's a good question to ask, because I think that Dynamo essentially does that. We put a series of commands, if you will, together, or nodes. We pre-package it. That way we can just run it. We open it, we run it, boom, it's done. And that way I think it would be very similar to that. So yeah, it's a good question. And there was also a question of, can you show how to add a node? Absolutely. So I'll show you 2 methods, one of which is probably a little more proper. The other one I do just because I don't know what Dynamo has to offer. So for example, this section up here, this kind of, if you're relating it to Revit, it's kind of like the project browser. You can click in here in Revit. I can come to selection if I'm trying to select something, and you can just hit the drop downs here. And you can look at all the different nodes that Dynamo has to offer. So if I wanted to select a category, I could just click on category, and then you'll see it drops that node right onto the workspace here. Then I can choose my category. Say I wanted to grab some air terminals, and then I could plug that in somewhere. So off on the left-hand side, you can look if you're specifically working in Revit, there's Revit-specific stuff. If I wanted to find something for one of my packages, I could come in here and go to Clockwork and say, okay, well, Clockwork has their own Revit section and their selection tools. Maybe I want to select something by face, so on and so forth. So that's one way you could add a node. It's a great question. Or what I like to do is you can right-click on the canvas and just start typing what you want. And that's what I do, because half the time I don't know where to look or really what it is I'm looking for. So for example, if I knew I wanted to select a category, I could just right-click and type in category, and see what option comes up. If I'm like, okay, well, if I hover over these, it's going to give me a little description of what each of these does, which is great. And so I can see this one say, okay, it grabs all building categories. Well, that sounds nice. So I'm going to click on that one, and you can see it's the exact same node. So if I wanted to search for something like select by category, I could just type in select category and see what comes up. All elements of category, by category and level, all sorts of stuff. So you can kind of search a couple keywords what you're looking for. Sometimes in Dynamo, you'll see here, there's no spaces. It's separated by a period. So sometimes you could do select dot category and see if anything comes up. It doesn't look like it. Okay, so maybe we just select by and see what options we have. And you can kind of see, here we go, select by category and view, which finds that node I'm looking for. So if I'm trying to create something in Dynamo that I haven't been able to find on the forums or I don't have any direction in, I just try and think logically through Revit. Okay, well in Revit, I would select the view, then I would grab the room and I would move the room. And that's essentially kind of what I'm doing in this Dynamo script. I'm grabbing, you know, the view that I'm working in, I'm selecting my rooms, and then I'm moving my room. So you just kind of think of that sequential order. So these are great questions. And by all means, feel free to ask questions through these scripts. Okay, so what we've done, we've selected our current document, our current view, we've grabbed all the rooms of that view, and now I'm simply gonna run this script called center rooms. I'm gonna unfreeze this, and what I'll do here, now with my reference on, if I go ahead and have all of this set and completed, all my nodes plugged together, I can hit run, and you'll see in a matter of seconds, it automatically jumps each one of those rooms back to the center. So now I could hit tag room, tag all not tagged, come to my rooms, and click OK. And now all of my room tags are going to be centered on the floor plan. So you can see how quickly in, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, in 5 nodes, you're able to save yourself a ton of time rather than manually moving some of that stuff to the center, placing the room tags, so on and so forth. So that has been super valuable on a project we're working on. A slight modification I wanted to show you in case you did decide that you wanted to do more than just by view. There is another iteration that's even shorter to just do all the rooms in the entire project. And in that case, what we can do is just tell Dynamo, grab the category of rooms, grab every physically placed room in the project and center it. So that one's only 3 nodes, does the same exact thing. What I'll do here just to show you. I got 2 different floors here just to show you now. If I go ahead and I run this one, you'll see it did it on both the first floor and the second floor, does them in the entire project just as fast, even, you know, a smaller amount of nodes. It's only 3 instead of 5. There's a lot of variations you can do with each one of these scripts. You can do it for your specific view. You can do it for the entire project. Any questions on that? So to me, that's a really good example of a practical use for Dynamo, rather than, okay, let me do some really complex geometry with twists, turns, bends, fluid shapes, all that stuff that I feel like Dynamo is really kind of, that's the wow factor of it. But there's so many simple things that it can do that are going to save you a ton of time on a project. This is something we'll hold off for later. Let me just get all this back. Later iterations of this, but there's some really awesome things you can do in Dynamo. I'm just going to kind of show this as a teaser. What you can do is when you have a script like that that runs really well, what you can do is download other software, package those into tools. And so if I come up here, I've kind of started creating my own tool sets inside of Revit itself. And you can see here, here's that center by room, or that center room by view. You can package that node into a button. That way you don't have to have people in your staff opening Dynamo. And I can do that same thing, click that button, it runs that script, and you'll see it automatically does the same exact thing, but I just turned it into a Revit tool. So essentially that's kind of how Revit tools really are. So I'll show you more how to do that stuff when we get into some later sessions of this. But when you get some of these really simple Dynamo scripts, you can package them and kind of send them out, deploy them to your office and your teams, and not have to worry about them opening Dynamo as well. All right, so let me actually go ahead and center these again. And I'm going to tag all my rooms. And then let me turn off my reference line. Okay. Any questions at all about that script? Okay. I'm going to jump into my next one. This is another one I feel like saves a lot of time. There are a lot of third-party tools here that do something similar, but this is kind of a one-stop shop of just clicking a button and letting it go. And this also can be packaged into a tool. And this is something that we all know all too well. We place our rooms, we go through, we add our doors, we tag our doors, and none of the door numbers match the room numbers. Super frustrating. There are a lot of tools out there. Like I mentioned, Imagine It has some tools, CTC has some tools, where you can start a series and go through and then either draw a line and they match the room numbers. I've seen that done in Dynamo before too. You draw a line and then it grabs all the doors and matches them that way. I feel I have found a simpler way to do that. And that's simply telling all of the doors to match the room they swing into, because most of the time that's the door number we want to grab. Now, I will preface this by saying that's not always the case, but this tool is kind of to get you 95% of the way there. If all of your doors can match the room number that they're swinging into, and then you have to go in and only adjust say 15 instead of 500, that's going to save you a ton of time there. So that's what this script's going to do. So let's walk through that one. All right, so again, thinking about how we're going to do this in Revit, we would just think of it the same way. We're going to grab all of the doors that we want to basically adjust in this project. And in this case, it's all of the doors. So again, I'm grabbing the category of the doors. Again, it's just that category node. You can right-click search category. I want to work with doors. And then this node you're going to get to know really well. It's called all elements of category. So I'm grabbing every element of the door that's placed. So any physical door that's placed in the model, I want to grab. And so if I do that, if I run this script, you're going to see it grabs 12 doors in this project. It's grabbed every door that's placed in the project. Now, since rooms are not, they do not cross phase, you do have to select a phase when working with grabbing the room. So you may have to do this with both new construction and existing. But what you can do is if I unfreeze this next node here, is I now say, okay, I have all my doors. I've grabbed every door that's in my Revit model. I now want to grab the room that that door is attached to. So there's this node here called door.rooms, and it allows you to grab all of your doors that you've previously selected. You choose what phase, that's going to be whatever phase is associated with those rooms. And then you can grab the room that the door either swings from or to. So for example, if I grab all of the rooms the doors are swinging to, it'll grab that list of 12. If I grab the from room and I hit run, you'll see it only fills some of them and some of them show up as null. And that's because these exterior doors here do not have any room they're swinging from, which just means empty. So if you see null, it just means empty. So what I want to do is keep it swinging to the room. So if I grabbed all of my doors in the project, I grab the rooms that they're swinging into. So now I have a list of all the rooms that those doors are swinging into. And then my next step is, well, I just want to know what room number those are. So if I unfreeze this node here, if I grab this room.number, it's just grabbing, okay, well, grab your input is all the rooms you want to see. So here are all the rooms the doors are swinging to. I plug that into my room.number node, and if I run that, you can see now it gives me a list of all the room numbers. So this room here specifically is, you can match the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So room 0 is 101, room 1 is 102, so on and so forth. So now all I've done is I grabbed each room the doors swing into and I grabbed their room numbers. And then all I have to do now is push those room numbers to the door. So there is a node here called element set parameter by name. And essentially all this node is doing is it says, what parameter do you want to fill in? So I'm filling in the mark because the door number is the mark parameter in Revit. So my parameter name is mark, and I fill that in with a code block. So a code block is just an easy way to put in some text. All you have to do is double click on your canvas. The code block comes up. You can put in numbers. You can put in text. Any text has to be in quotes. So I could just write in test in quotes. And when I click off of it, it then gives me text that I can just place wherever I want. So that's all I've done there is just a code block. That's another one you'll use often. So now what it's saying was, well, what elements do you want to change? So I'm going to come back to all of my doors. So here are my elements. You can see elements match element. So I'm going to plug all of my doors into the element. I want it to grab the mark parameter of those elements. And then what do you want to change them to? So, well, now I know I have all of my room numbers. So I plug that list of room numbers into my value. So what it's going to do now is it's going to actually, let me drop a watch node here real quick. This kind of helps you see here. So here are all of my doors. So you can see door number 0 is swinging into room number 0, which has a room number of 101. So that's how Dynamo is continually seeing this information together. It's not just a random list of numbers. Door number 1 is in room number 1, which is numbered 102. So now it's saying, we'll grab this list of doors and apply these numbers to their mark. So if I do that, let me pull this over here so you can see it. This is currently numbered 122. This is room 101, 123, room 102. So now what I can do is run that, and you'll see just in a matter of seconds, now this door is named 101 to room number 101. Now, something that you will notice very quickly when you do run this script again, if anything is swinging out of that door, it's just going to take on a different name. But when you get to a room that has multiple doors, it just lists them the same number. Excuse me. So you can see that lobby is 100 and each of these doors get changed to 100. So all you'll have to do there is just go in and add your 0.1 or A, B, C, D, whatever numbering system that you use at your office. That's the only thing you're going to have to do. So again, a super short script that grabs all your doors, finds the room that they're swinging into and matches the number. And that'll get you about 90–95% of the way there, because you do any room that has more than one door, you have to adjust. And then if for whatever reason this door was swinging out, it would have grabbed the 100 and you would just want to change that to 107. So again, not foolproof, but in a matter of just seconds, you can have most of that work done for you. And as you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 nodes. So in less than 10 nodes, another great tool that you can use. This is another tool that you can package together and you can make a button there. Any questions on that one? Okay, on to the next one. All right, this one I need to reopen Dynamo. This next script is a little bit more for QA/QC. I can't imagine that any of you have found a really easy and fun way to look at warnings in your model. It's not super intuitive. I have found ways to extract warnings to Excel files, parse those Excel files, put everything together so I can say, okay, you know, I have 17 of this warning, 100 of this warning, so on and so forth. So I started thinking this was a script that I saw in a presentation and kind of recreated and added some more functionality to it. And what this will do, super simple script, you can see very few notes here. What it will do is grab your warnings and it'll color your warnings for you so you can visually see and Revit what's going on here. So this first script, there's 2 iterations you can run. The first one is to grab all your warnings and then to color all of your warnings one color. So here, super simple nodes. There's this warning tools .get warnings. What this does is it grabs every warning in your model. For some reason, you do have to do a true false boolean. This is basically tells it to yes run or not run. It's just a yes or no. So you turn it to true and you have to put that in your toggle. But essentially all this does here, if I freeze this, use my watch node, this will grab all of your warnings, and then you can choose to have it give you a list of the elements involved in that warning or the text of that warning. So if I do the text and hit run, you'll see it just kicks out. I have 3 warnings in the sample file, and then here are the text involved in each one of those warnings. So you can read it that way, or you can do the failing elements, which basically just means what model elements are involved in that warning. And you can see that these 2 walls are clashing together, these 2 walls are clashing together, and then we have an issue with a stair. That's kind of what the output is for that warning. And then what we can do here is just under the color palette node, you can choose a bunch of different colors. So I'm just going to choose red. Red is bad. Warnings are bad. And then I'm going to grab this node that is just simply element.override color in view. So all it's doing is per this view, only this view only, I can plug in the elements that I want to color. So I want to grab any element that's failing, and then I want to give it a color. So if I do that, and I go to this model here, and I just run this script, you'll see in a matter of seconds, it just colors every model element that color red, so I can visually see what objects here are giving me those warnings. So it's a nice visual reference to already, any of that other stuff you're already doing. You can see what's actually happening at those, but it's a quick way to see what specifically is happening in your model. Now, if you want to get a little bit more specific, what you can do is create a variation of this script, and everything pretty much stays the same with the exception of now what you can do is drop in an all warnings of type, and this will give you a list of all the different types of warnings that you have. So if I hit my drop down here, I'm only seeing 2 this time because 2 of my warnings were the same. My only complaint with this is you can't further extend what these are, but usually you can tell what the warning is by reading the first half of that sentence. So I have a couple highlighted walls that overlap, and then a stair top end does not exceed or cannot reach the level. So I have 2 different warnings. So I'm going to choose that stair top warning because I only want to color where that warning is specifically. Then there's a variation of this node we were using earlier called warning.failing elements. You plug in the specific warning you have, and it kicks out that same list of elements that are involved in that warning. And then this override color in view stays the same. So I'm going to choose my red color, plug all my nodes in. I come back here, and I run this node. It happened super quick. You didn't even see it. And then if I look inside here, I can see, okay, there's that stair that's causing the issue. And if I zoom in there, you can see, yep. But sure enough, it doesn't go up to that selected level. So you can very quickly, again, run a couple QA/QCs, grab that specific warning that you want to worry about, and then color code those warnings. Any questions? So again, 4 nodes here, 4 nodes here, 2 ways of doing something very similar, and you got a little bit of power.
Josh, so one thing I did see is that you basically, when you got multiple options there, you have to freeze one of them when you run it, right?
Yes, that's a great question. I should have mentioned that. So for simplicity's sake, I wanted to package these things together for you all.
Right.
You could probably create these as 2 separate scripts that way you don't have to worry about freezing anything. But simply freezing, you can just freeze at any point in your string of nodes to kind of test some things. You might not want to try and fully kick that outcome at any point, so you can freeze. You'll notice if you freeze here, anything behind it freezes. So it's a good way to preview what's happening. But yes, these are two completely different scripts or graphs, and I just will freeze one when I'm not using the other. But for most scripts, you'll probably have something completely separate. That's a great question. You can right click and freeze that or anything like that. Any other questions on any of those? Hopefully you saw some value and you'll take those and develop them even further. Awesome. All right, so those are the 3 that I was going to show. So thank you for hanging in there with me. I'm going to pass it over. I'm going to stop sharing, pass it over to Kevin, and I'm going to let him share some of the nodes that he's been developing and working on at his office, one of which I'm actually really excited about. He told me what it was, and I can't wait to use it.
Awesome. Well, I will try to follow up on the great explanation that you have there on the scripts there, Josh. So for what I've been using Dynamo for, and again, it's only been a few months, is just trying to find areas where I bump my head against production and repetitive tasks and things that kind of help in a day-to-day construction set type path. So I haven't spent a whole ton of time with Dynamo. I think I'm probably into about my 10th script here. The couple that I'm showing here today are some of the ones that we use the most often and have here over the last couple of months for them. So what I have here is I made just kind of a chintzy little building for us to discuss here today. Nothing too crazy with what's going on. And we had this happen on a larger project a while back. We had some people go out and do our as-builts and came back with a model, and everybody said, okay, we'll start on the demo plans, and everything, the phasing was all incorrect. And I think we've all inadvertently had this happen, or had staff that didn't quite know what they were doing for early modeling cases have this happen. And the only thing that we had found before, is to go through and filter things out, individually, and then actually physically changing over their phase in the properties. So the effort here was to try to come up with a way around that, so we didn't have to do it per item, per element, per family type, etc. for what's going on. So Josh before was showing an idea for how to select sort of everything of a type or category or an element in the model. There's another selection item that we use here in this script itself. So select model elements works really well. And what we can do is click on our change selection here, and then we can actually typically how we would just drag a selection bin, and that'll then start picking up in our script. These are actual Revit element ID numbers. So we now have a direct selection method for how to input different items into the script itself, which has been very handy. So, oops. I was going to try Josh's little trick on freezing and see if that worked. So what we can see here is in our watch node, it's grabbed all of our walls, our doors. In here, I've got, curtain wall systems, panels, mullions, there's a roof, there's HVAC, electrical. So really, it's everything, some things that don't have phases as well. So what we were finding when I was first trying to make this work is kind of where error messages would pop up, and it would kind of prevent me from running the script itself. So I kind of ended up on the same set parameter by name element, and even though that we fed things into it that may not actually have the parameter of phase created in it, a curtain wall grid or a level tag or things like that, the script itself would keep running past that. So it would do each line item, and even if it had a fail, it would just kick out an error report. And for what we did, it didn't really matter that we had that error report in there. It's kind of the same thing as when we selected all items, just filtering the different things back out. So we let the script kind of do it for ourselves. So we gather all of our elements in, and we know we want to change them. So as Joshua kind of mentioned, you use code blocks all the time. So we're feeding in here to the set parameter by name node, the parameter that we want to set in, which is a string. So we know that we want it to be the phase in creation. and we know that we want the variable for the change to be our phase. So I kind of like this as well. I haven't tried to deploy it if we had, say, multi-phased, where I could run around and pull some different walls out if we made another phase. This is just the typical existing and new constructions that are located in here. So I'll change this to existing. We can see we've got kind of a hodgepodge of things going on here. We can run the script here. We do see the warning come up that some of the operators had failed, and that's just because we know the node elements have some of them that do not have a phase creation item into it, and then we can see it's changed over our phase for everything inside of our model itself. So I really liked doing the script this way with the phase control itself, because this is a Revit node that's actually pulling the phases back out of our model. So it's tracking which phases we already have in there. You can connect this in with a little bit of gymnastics to make it kind of come out of a code block, out of a string that you would define yourself, if you wanted to rewrite it into a whole future script or a whole future phase for itself. So that's one that has saved us just gobstoppers of time. You know, instead of running around and manually clicking on a lot of things that have been going on. So I'll open up another one here. So kind of going along on that same idea, when we had something that I would kind of bump my head against, that's where I tried to develop a script for what we were doing. So we ended up for a little while previously, and then here with Shift, doing a lot of these kind of small projects where we actually might even do a lighting layout, a power layout, an HVAC layout, a demo, or a structure layout. You know, small commercial, single family applications. We were seeing this a lot. So we knew we needed sheets set up that would be identical, that then we could put into different view templates for kind of like what I was just saying, if they all needed to go back out and into other disciplines and things like that. And I mean, we all kind of know you can duplicate views, you can duplicate the sheets, and kind of coming straight forward. But if I knew I needed 6 identical copies of this sheet, that then I could just come in and adjust the view template for. That just helps save some time, save some production, and especially on the small projects for that. So I had initially started working on this script, and ultimately I found this bimorph nodes plugin, or excuse me, package. And I was trying to do it individually, and I could make some things pop over, I can make some things not pop over, and I was searching a lot of the forums and whatnot, and people were like, well, you know, exactly what you're describing is already coded for you. So this script has ended up kind of working out so well for us. It all centers around a pre-programmed node, and Joshua kind of hit on some of these. A lot of people who program more than they do design and production have already built a lot of these for us, so we can start to kind of utilize some of that functionality that's already pre-built into what we have. So we know we have a sheet that we want to duplicate, and we can start using some of the actual Revit options, you know, like when we duplicate a view, or are we duplicating as a dependent or a detail? Do we want to duplicate the views? And then we can start to control some of the names so that we can start to track them as they come back out on the other side. And again, this works for all sorts of different objects that are on our sheets. So as we run this out, it'll completely create a new sheet for us, if I can open it. drops everything back down in the same location. We can see that it's appended the name of each of these. So we have a detail view, a legends, schedule, schedule, it duplicates everything right onto the sheet so we can keep tracking that, or even just on sheet items that we have for different things. So this has been a very helpful thing for us. And one of the things I just wanted to show today is sometimes finding the package can get you so far for what you're already after in terms of the functionality of the individual scripts.
Hey,
I have a question on this.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go
go ahead, Nick.
it may be similar a question. Go ahead, Josh.
I was going to ask, out of curiosity, yeah, I see option. To go figuring out the numbers that you needed to put in there. Was that just kind of a try and error?
Or have had
Okay.
that functionality built into it.
Great.
So they're taking in the code block from it itself, and then that was just giving them, I think, the option for what was there. I think you probably could play around with.
Okay, perfect. So if you do, that's good to know. So if you did hover over that, it says it right there that you can enter certain values, do different things. Because I find that to be difficult sometimes, where they don't say what your input really needs to be, but that's nice that they have it laid out to where you know exactly what you need to put in.
Right, and certainly it would be something that I wouldn't have easily stumbled across without kind of doing that. And I think that also brings up a good tip here too, the whether it's a package node, well, a properly packaged node, or an existing node from Dynamo, you can always hover over the node after you put it out, and gives you some extra information usually. And I found that to be helpful. Get some other people to try to get or FMO itself. So I have one other script I was going to show here. So again, kind of a variation on a theme, looking at areas where things were frustrating me or not coming together well. If we had, I think I'm running Revit 2019. I think in Revit 2020 or 2021, some of this functionality has started to be more native to the actual program itself, but frequently we would end up seeing something like this where we just had mismatched text on an actual detail for itself. And yeah, so before, we could actually do that natively inside, we were trying to find easy ways of just changing these back out. So this, just kind of a short little 5-node script here, where we go through and collect all of the text note elements in that category. And then here we're passing that list of elements through to the end, and then we're converting each text note, and then this string to upper will change over the uppercase. So the text itself gets split into a list of all of the individual family of text notes. And then we take out the individual text with this note here into what's called a string. So that's just computer programming sort of language for text itself. And then we can manipulate the text in certain different ways. You know, we could put a bold or an italics or underline, you know, any sort of typical text manipulation you could do to the individual strings that you have, and then we just plug them back in. So as Josh had kind of shown before with, as we get each of these lists of elements, in a simple script like this, we can just track the Dynamo will track them all together, so it knows the first one will be the first one coming out. So kind of a simple little one that, you know, quickly changes all of our text back over to all be capitalized itself. I've tried to play around with this too on, you know, the inevitable, what happens when one of these is Arial and one of them is Tahoma or something like that. And I haven't gotten that one to work as cleanly and crisply, but I do believe there are some ways there where you could start to track some of the family parameters for each of those as well. It's kind of one of the future ones I hope to work on. So yeah, those were the three that I had. I don't know if anybody's got any questions, or I will let Guy take over from there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kevin. Let me share my screen here. And you'll see a split screen here in a minute. Okay. Hopefully you all see half Revit, half Dynamo here. Mine is a couple more nodes than everybody else's. Hopefully I didn't approach that spaghetti string idea, but you know, I'm a structural engineer, so Joshua and Kevin and I got together last week, and I kind of picked their brains a little bit about what would be a useful tool as an architect and how could I create that in Dynamo. So I created these this week. First couple I'm going to show, and then the last one, if we have time, will be a structural specific one, but I think there's some applications that could go beyond architecture. So hopefully that could be something useful to you as well. That one's not as polished. I wrote that about 5 years ago, so it may, you know, there may be some issues there. So the first one I want to share though is, and I'll minimize Dynamo for a minute. So I just took the Revit sample building and the architectural building, and then I put in some ductwork and a piece of pipe that goes through the building. And I said, well, wouldn't it be nice if we somehow knew if a duct or a pipe penetrated a fire rated wall? And then we use Dynamo to kind of highlight those walls. I think that could be a good architectural tool. You guys can give me a thumbs down if you think that's a bad idea, but I thought it would be a nice way to kind of QA, QC the model and see if, hey, there's something happening here. And it doesn't have to be just mechanical systems. It could be structure too. Maybe we have a kicker model that goes through a wall and then fire sealing that if it's a 2-hour wall or whatever could be problematic. So I just wanted to highlight those areas. So that's what I did. I just took the building model that we have, or that comes out of the box Revit, and I put in a piece of ductwork and piping. And then I had Dynamo do for us, grab those two and see if they intersect one another. So I'll describe my code here, or the graph here, and I've used a color-coded system for a little while. It's slightly different than Joshua's, so hopefully that's not too frustrating to hop in and out. I can, my contact info is there too, so if there's anything that doesn't really work, or you can reach out to Joshua or Nicholas and let me know. I'd be happy to, time permitting, be able to help troubleshoot anything that could be useful to you all. But anyway, I have a color coding system similar to Joshua's, but slightly different. And I use user inputs are blue. I use green as stuff I'm reading from Revit. I use orange and pink as when I'm writing data either to Revit or Excel, or I'm creating some geometry in Revit. So I think those orange and pink ones are really where you just have to be careful, because Dynamo is a computer program built on top of Revit. So if you run it, you can manipulate a very large model pretty quickly. So if you see some red, and at least the way I've color coded it, that's just an area you want to make sure you maybe freeze first before you do it. I haven't done any of that today because I just wanted it to be QA QC. So Dynamo will flag what's an issue, and then a senior architect or a modeler or an architect's going to get in there and just say, or one of you guys will get in there and say, hey, this is something I need to pay a little more attention to, and then the final execution is to you, much to the same thing as Joshua did with the warnings, but similar concept. So I'll make this a little bit bigger and describe what my graph here does. And then purple, just to finish that thought, I guess purple is just whenever I'm doing calculations and data processing within Dynamo. So that stuff lives native to Dynamo. So we've seen these couple nodes here already, but I'm just going to select all walls. I'm going to say this is my category, and then I add this additional node to select all elements of that category. So all this green box is doing right now is selecting all walls. And I put these little switches in here. These are little code blocks. I put this switch in here in the beginning of my my graphs usually, and graphs and scripts are kind of used interchangeably with Dynamo. But I put this little switch here. So if I'm running my model and something's going wrong and I need to debug it, or I have different places on my model, I put these little switches here so I can just disconnect everything. All this, and then not have that run at all. It's similar to the freezing, but it does for the whole graph. And the reason I put it in here is because oftentimes you'll need to feed a bunch of calculations from this node here. And if I fed this over to there, I fed it down to somewhere else, or fed it to 4 or 5 places, in order for me to stop that, I guess I could freeze this, which would be good. But before I learned about freezing with Joshua, I always put in these switches, and you can just disconnect it and it essentially turns it off, and you're not feeding anything else downstream. So that's just the way I do it. And I've called that a pass through and a switch. Okay, so all I did was select all walls, put a little switch here, and then I said, okay, I want to extract all the walls fire ratings. So that's a type parameter of walls. So I said, okay, element get parameter value by name is a very, very handy node that comes out of the box Revit, or out of the box Dynamo. So I just say, okay, I want to get the parameter type, and then I'll go one level lower, and I'm going to get the type parameter fire rating. So these string nodes are the same as what Kevin and Joshua are doing with the code block. When you double click a code block and you put in a quotes, and I put in type here and put a semicolon, these two are the same, but I didn't use code block most of the time. I just put in, you can also just put in string, and then you don't have to worry about the syntax of it, anything. And the way you get string is either by searching through the library like Joshua showed us, or typing in, right-clicking and typing in string, and you'll get this little box here. And that works for any variable type too. If you're unsure of how to feed into it or how to code a string, you could just right-click and start saying things like number, and it'll give you a number, it'll give you sliders, it'll give you, if you need to do an integer, it'll give you integers. So there's a lot of handy things in there that allow you to not worry about the syntax of using code blocks. So I tried to do that for the ones I created for this demo. So all this does is this extracts the fire rating of the walls. And then I have an input that says, okay, input what the fire rating is that you want to look at. Do you want to look at a 1 hour wall, a 2 hour wall, 4 hour wall, whatever it might be? So you would input that here in blue. And this is the only thing the user would have to input, with one exception down here for ductwork. But you would put in your fire rating. And then there's these things called the Boolean operators. So it's like a comparison tool they have in Dynamo. Equal is says, take all my fire rating parameters, tell me what they are. So I guess I could put in a watch node here, but I'm not as craft. Mine's a little bit longer than the others. Maybe I should do that real quick. I'll just freeze at this point beyond, and I'll put in a watch node here. Oh, sorry. And I'll show you what I'm extracting from all the walls. And if I run this, I'm going to get all the walls with input fire rating properties. So you can see in this model, there's 47 walls, but only a handful of them have any kind of rating whatsoever or 2-hour rating. So that's what's coming out of this fire rating. So when I go into this comparison tool, I say, take all these ratings, and if that rating equals 2, just tell me in a true or false if that's true. So now I can filter my list, and all this, I won't get into too much of the details here, but you can ask me more specific questions after I share this. But all this list does here is it filters any wall that has a 2-hour rating, and it says, okay, and I'll unfreeze this. It says this equal just tells you true or false whether it has a 2-hour rating. And there's nothing in there now because I froze it, but you would say, okay, now give me all the walls. And I feed in all the walls from a list, from the original list. And then I say mask the walls. And this is just a way for it to say, if this wall has a true associated with it, give me that wall. If it has a false, give me that wall in a separate set. So it gives you 2 outputs. One is the walls with a 2-hour rating, and one is the walls without a 2-hour rating. So these filters can be pretty handy. And from there, I take all the walls that are not 2-hour rated, and I'll stay at a high level now. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but this will just reset all the graphic, the wall overrides for if it wasn't a 2-hour wall. I don't want any overrides on it. I don't want it to show up as red, and that'll be apparent here in a minute. But if I do have a 2-hour wall, I need to extract that geometry of the wall into Dynamo. So the input here is I have 2-hour wall, and then I extract that geometry from Revit. I put it into Dynamo, and then I flatten this list because this will be like a big list of walls, and whether they're, however many walls are 2-hour rated, and it may be like just a longer list. So sometimes you have to flatten the output, and then that's what I get there. So that's how I get all the wall geometry, and I separate the walls of 2-hour walls and non-2-hour walls. And I pull that into here. And when I run this, it'll be a little more clear. So then I do the same thing kind of for ductwork. I just say, okay, I want to select all the ductwork or piping or whatever I want to do. I'm going to select that across the board throughout the project. So you can just pick from the categories of systems you want to compare here. It's showing it all in the same model, but even if it wasn't a link, you could separate it out, and you could grab information from a link and pull it in and then look at this. I've done that before. So it selects all the ductwork, and then this element geometry is just taking the ductwork that's in Revit, and it's pulling it into Dynamo so that I can see the wall geometry and the ductwork geometry and use Dynamo node to see if those two intersect one another. Does that make sense? So the only reason I'm bringing geometry into Dynamo is because I want to see if those two intersect one another. So I pull that in, and then I flatten the list again. This is just a way to make it more manageable. And then here, so this list for the walls will be like 5 or 6 items. The list for the ductwork is just going to be 1 item from my from the model that I made, the simple model that I made. So whenever I have an unequal list and I need to see whether walls intersect with ducts or piping, I need to use, that's when I usually use Python. So there's a way that you can do Python within Dynamo, and it's helpful for a couple things that I've seen. And Joshua, you correct me if you use it a better way. But I use it when I have uneven lists and I need to compare those lists to one another. So I say I want to cycle through all the walls, and I want to look at each wall and see if there's ever a duct or a pipe that intersects that wall. So I'm using Python for that. Now, I also use it when I need order of operations. So like say I want Dynamo to do this first and this second. Dynamo doesn't normally out of the box, when you put in all these graphical nodes, it does it all at the same time. So sometimes if you need things to sequence themselves, Python is the best tool for that. And then the other way you can use Python, and I'm not as versed in this, is instead of writing like a C# API that adds on to Revit, you can use Python to access the API of Revit. So the API is just, you know, all those little buttons and add-ins we get in Revit, and we can start to create things. Python allows us to do a little bit of data mining without having to compile a big C# program in the API and start to look at stuff. It just allows us to make it into a node. And the way you get a Python node is just like you get every other node. You just right-click or search through the library, start typing Python in here, and you can see there's an out-of-the-box Python script. And then you open this up, you open this up, and then it gives you kind of the initial stuff that you want to start with. These are very handy. And I'll give a quick spiel on where I learned this the best was the dynamoprimer.org. That I found to be one of the best places for me to learn all this. It's pretty systematic, steps you through, you know, lower, you know, just getting started stuff to like Python to creating your own packages and nodes and stuff if you want to go to that level. I found it to be very, very helpful there. So all that said, I have a Python graph here that I made. And again, email me if you need some help with any of these. If this is useful, I hope it's useful. But you know, if it's useful for you, please, I'd love to make it even better for your office if that makes sense. But all this does is it loops through all the walls and just checks whether it's just 2 for loops that checks whether the wall intersects a piece of ductwork. And if it does, it says true or false again. And now I can get a list of all the 2-hour walls that have a pipe or anything going through it. So all that comes out of this is a true or false again that shows whether I have some issue or not. And this right before it is just a code block, because in Python, everything gets hidden. What input 1 is and what input 0 is are hidden inside this Python graph. So you'd have to open it up and you'd have to look, okay, input 1 is 0, ceilings is 1. And ceilings isn't even right. That was just left over from me doing a different graph. So I need to correct that. But this should really say MEP, piping or ducting. I'll correct that for when we share it. So this just tells you input 0 is the wall geometry and input 1 is the pipe duct geometry, whatever we want to look against. And then from there, it just filters it again and says, okay, if I have a 2-hour wall that has a penetration through it, color that one red using the same node that Joshua shared with me, and I put it into here. And then walls that are 2-hour that don't have a penetration, this just resets the graphics. And I'll show you why. So without further ado, and sorry for the long explanation there, I can take this ductwork and I can take all the walls in the project. And now when I run my graph, hopefully this works. I run it, now I get a wall that's red here, and I know this wall is a rated wall that has some issue with it. Even more, what Dynamo can do really fast is it can run automatically. So if you change at the bottom, instead of hitting run, you change Dynamo to automatic, I can have this running automatically, and I could even minimize it if I want. And now I could say, okay, maybe sorry, my zoom here, it's getting a little off. So now let's say I'm moving this ductwork around and say, hey, well, maybe if I just move this ductwork over here above this door, I can get away from a fire damper or whatever architectural thing you might need to do. You could move it over here. Since Dynamo is running in the background, let's say, hey, wait, that wall is actually fire rated too. Not that you wouldn't know that, I suppose, but Dynamo can be running in the background in such a way that it can just catch up with you almost instantaneously as you're doing modeling. So I think it can be pretty handy. And that's why I have those clear the overrides. So if I go back to my Dynamo graph, why I have the clear overrides in the graph is just so, I can reset after we've made an adjustment and it doesn't stay red forever. It sets it back to 0, or it sets it back to the whatever graphics you have for that particular one. And then in the background, can't see it right now, but there, you know, it's generating, should be generating this geometry in the background. So you can see this is all geometry that's built within Dynamo. So it grabbed all the 2-hour walls, it grabbed that ductwork, made a geometry from it, and it said that, or it checked that. So if you want to, there's geometry in Dynamo and there's code in Dynamo, so you can toggle them on and off and see what happens. So then if I convert this to, it's still on automatic, so as soon as I make this change, it's going to make the change really fast. So let's say I change this to now I want to look at that pipe. I change it, and now the pipe is kind of the one that's the culprit in terms of penetrating a righted wall. And it actually went, you know, that's me being a bad architect here, that pipe went through the exterior wall. So that became an issue. Or, you know, one thing we can do, and I don't think I'm going to run out of time here, so I'm just going to show one last thing on this. But let's say you didn't want to look at just pipes or ducts. You could copy this graph here. You can just hit Control C and Control V like everything else and say, I want to look at ductwork and piping. So now I go up to ductwork. Duct systems, and I say, okay, instead of feeding in just one category, let's make a list of both of these. So you can make what's called, you can create a list in Dynamo. So this list is going to have 2 items. It's going to have ductwork, and now it's going to have piping, like that. And then I'm going to send that list into my switch, and then I run that, and now hopefully it flags both issues. So now you can see the ductwork is flagging on that wall too. So that's the one I created. I thought it could be helpful for figuring out where fire dampers are, or ceiling, or any of that kind of thing. The other graph I made that I didn't share, and then I'll open up for questions, was taking ceilings and the walls adjacent to ceilings. That one's a little more complicated. When I agreed to it with Joshua, I said, yeah, sure, I can do that. And then it turned into quite a project.
Sorry, guys.
Well, that's my fault.
It's session 2.
Session 2.
Yeah.
I mean, that one will just check whether the top of the wall is at least 6 inches above the ceiling. And if it's not, then it'll flag it as red. And then you know you have to go and look at those walls to make sure that it's at least 6 inches above the ceiling or things like that.
Yeah. Hey, real quickly, Guy, and I think this is kind of for Josh. What right now you've got an automatic running, and then I understand the manual. How do you just kind of turn it off without having to kind of reset the parameters? Like, so it's, you know, your components aren't visually the red anymore. It's just disconnecting Dynamo Script at the time.
Yeah, disconnecting, and then Dynamo just runs in a way whereas if you were to like take this view, it's only in this view that you see these red. If I opened up another 3D view, they wouldn't show up as red. It's only overriding the graphics in this view.
Got it.
So when I turn Dynamo off, it's just kind of like, it's as if I went in here, I right-clicked the element and I said override graphics by element.
Right.
And then I change it to red, so it kind of lives with it. So this view, if I were better about it, I would just rename to be, you know, QA/QC wall penetration. So then this view is only dedicated to issues, and you wouldn't have any, it wouldn't affect any other part. I don't know, Joshua, if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think once it's embedded in the model, it's embedded in the model. You either have to reset your overrides, or what I would do based off the script that I've seen how fast it runs, I would change my fire rating to be like 100 or something and then run it, and it would just clear all the colors out because there's no fire rating of 100 anywhere. And then it'd take you back to, you know, no graphic overrides in your model.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you could quickly modify this. Sorry, I'll show it to you. Sorry, let me just slow that down, and then, yeah, you could do that, Joshua. That's a good point. So instead of saying, I just want to highlight all the 2-hour walls red, I now want to say, okay, well, I want all the 2-hour walls to clear their overrides, I could just take these 2-hour walls and connect this node over here and disconnect this one. And now when I run it, it should just clear those graphics for the whole view. So I'm on 2 screens here, but I run this and now it's going to reset all that. So you could just adjust where the nodes are going and say, instead of sending my 2-hour to the red, I can send my 2-hour to the clear overrides and everything's back to normal. So I've done, that's what I did to kind of practice this before before this talk.
No, I appreciate it. Well, I think we're about almost out of time here, so we should probably open up if there's any other questions that weren't asked yet by participants. So either you can unmute yourself or throw something into the chat if you got any other questions.
Hopefully that means everybody's super excited. Okay, we got one. Good question. Okay, so the question is, if you're brand new at this and you plan to be self-taught, how do you get started? If you have Revit 20, which is downloaded Dynamo, Open Source Studio, via Autodesk, what are the other first steps of playing around the software? That is a great question. So if you've downloaded Revit, Dynamo comes with it in these later releases, excuse me. And there is a great website. It's called the Dynamo Primer. I'll put this, I'm going to throw this in the chat. I don't know why it doesn't. There we go. I'll throw this in the chat. So it's a great place to start. And just, what is it, Dynamo BIM? Throw this in there as well. There's a lot of great tutorial videos, some good information. You can, search all sorts of stuff here. Where I have learned the most is going through the forum and searching different topics, something I'm trying to do. I often will just Google search something because I know I'm not going to be the first one to think about anything. There's no possible way. So if it was like, okay, well, how do I extract warnings to Excel? I would just Google Dynamo extract warnings to Excel. It most likely will lead you to this Dynamo BIM site, and you can go into forums and read about it. And the great thing about this is so many people are so willing to share their scripts. So a lot of the times, if they don't send you the script themselves, sometimes they'll have it attached to the forum. They'll send you a lot of images, or they'll just be in the forum of step-by-step what you need to do. So that's a great place to look. I'm trying to think of any other tutorial sites that I know of, and feel free, Kevin and Guy, to jump in.
Yeah, I used the lynda.com has a couple of classes, and you can get it free with your Columbus Public Library. So that's handy.
Yeah, I would say the Primer and Lynda for me are pretty good. Marcellus Gambarelli, who's like a BIM director at a structural firm in LA. He has like practical Dynamo tips. He has a couple AU presentations that are like YouTube videos, and he does very simple nodes and talks about practical things. It's more slanted to structural engineers, but still, I think, pretty useful stuff. I can send you, I'll send his name to you, Joshua, if there's anything to send out afterwards. And those were a couple good videos I used in the beginning. So. Yeah,
and then there are some things to know that we didn't really talk about. So when you download Revit, Dynamo now comes with it. There's also Dynamo Core, which I do believe is a standalone version of Dynamo that runs on your computer without having to access Revit. I think that allows you to grab into other programs. So you'll just want to use the Dynamo that works natively with Revit, that comes with Revit when you install it. And then you're also probably going to see with that comes Dynamo Player. We can talk more about that in another session. That allows you to plug a script into just a player, and you can send that out to your teams, and you just press play. It's very similar to running that. And then something that's going to be a must, and in the files that we'll send out to you, there are Dynamo packages like we talked about. Now, if any of the three of us used any custom node out of a package in a script and we send those to you, when you open that script and run it, you're going to get a bunch of errors because you don't technically have that node that we use in that custom package. So along with the scripts that we're going to send you, I'm going to send you a list of the packages to install. And do one of you still have Dynamo open? I do not. Okay, will you share your screen real quick? In Dynamo, at the top, there's just a button called Packages, and you just click on Search for Packages, and you can just search for the name of the package. I'm going to send you a screenshot of all the packages I have. Those are a great place to start. So just make sure that you install each of those packages, and then use that Dynamo Primer. It's a great place. Just the Dynamo BIM website, lynda.com, YouTube's great. And I really just say, get your hands dirty. Just think of something small to do. I think the very first thing I did in Dynamo was I said, I'm gonna start simple. I just wanna grab one wall and move it 10 feet to the left. And just figure it out. You know, think about how you work through that in Revit. I need to grab that wall. I need to grab a move command and I need to move it. And you can even Google search that. I got so stumped so fast I ended up having to Google how to even do that. But, you know, no shame there, just search. Yep, so there, guys showing you just go to packages, search for packages, and then you can just type in one. So Clockwork's a great one to have. And then Clockwork for Dynamo 2.x, and you can install the latest version there. Click OK. And then you'll see that it installs on the left-hand side, and you'll have, it doesn't take very long to add them, and you'll see them populate on your left-hand side. So great question. I hope this has given you some excitement about trying to start. If you haven't, it's great to know that you're interested in starting it. And we hope to have, I know Guy had a couple more scripts he wanted to share, but we ran out of time. So we will be doing another one of these soon. We've talked about even just kind of creating a monthly, you know, virtual happy hour or something just to chat Dynamo. Kevin, Guy, and I had a great time the other day. We just got together and we're talking about things we were using Dynamo for, and it was super cool. So if you're interested in that, just keep an ear out. Maybe we'll shoot some information out. And yeah, any other questions though? That was a great question. Thanks, Jonathan.
Well, I think what we'll do is we'll reach out to everybody that was participants on here to once we've kind of got the scripts all packaged and ready to share with everyone. We'll probably also kind of engage you to see if, again, you're interested in sharing a script as we kind of, you know, right now we're targeting November, but I think it could even be sooner if everybody's kind of ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we could maybe bump that up a little bit if there's interest. I'll sometime tomorrow I'll send out where you can get those scripts, and maybe I'll put some information there. I'll make sure I put a little note in there with our contact information, and feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear what you're doing, how you're using it, even if it's something simple or something more complex. We'd love to hear it.
All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.